My father mocked, my husband rejected. That night, I silenced them all. I'm Elara, 32, and that night, as the soft jazz mingled with the sparkling lights on a Manhattan rooftop, I saw that look. The one I knew too well. Contempt, tinged with pity. Not from a stranger, but from my husband, Michael. He stood among the celebrating crowd, a huge career breakthrough for me, an architect. It was supposed to be my night, yet I felt like a ghost in my own story. That feeling of being invisible, forgotten, it just gnawed at me. That night, I realized I was no longer the Elara they knew. I had vanished and no one even noticed. Before I tell you everything, tell me, where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. My life, before that storm, was once a perfect picture, painted in the muted, comforting tones of domestic bliss and professional ambition. I remember the Brooklyn mornings, waking up to sunlight filtering through the window, painting stripes across our worn wooden floors. The faint scent of Michael's freshly brewed coffee, strong and inviting, would already be lingering in our apartment, a comforting signal of the day beginning. We'd sit at the small, worn wooden table by the window, the one we'd painstakingly refinished ourselves one rainy weekend, our hands stained with paint, laughing as we tried to remove the splatters. We'd read the paper together, not in silence, but with the quiet rustle of pages, occasionally pausing to share a headline or debate a current event. We discussed new architectural projects I was passionate about, my sketches spread out between us, his input always insightful, making me feel seen and understood. We'd lay out plans for our weekend getaways, a quiet hike upstate, the crisp scent of pine needles in the air, a spontaneous trip to a new city, getting lost in cobblestone streets and discovering hidden cafes. Michael, my husband, used to be my rock. His presence was a constant, solid anchor in my often turbulent creative world. He always called me his muse, his endless inspiration, and his words, then, felt like a genuine affirmation of my spirit. His hand, warm and reassuring, would often find mine across the table, a silent promise of support, a connection that felt unbreakable. My father, a stern man who always held high expectations, a man of few praises, had slowly, surprisingly, come to accept my chosen path. For years, he'd subtly pushed me towards a more stable career, something less creative, less unpredictable. But when I finally landed my dream job at a prestigious architectural firm, when my design started winning awards, when my name began to be recognized in the industry, I started to see a flicker of pride, hesitant but real, in his usually unreadable eyes. I vividly recall the night I was promoted to lead architect. The whole family gathered at my parents' house, the dining room filled with the warm hum of conversation and genuine laughter echoing through the room. My mother, beaming with maternal pride, served her famous lasagna, its rich aroma filling the air. Even my stoic father offered a rare, genuine smile, a softening around his eyes, as he raised a glass to my success. It was a feeling of calm, of fullness, a life I once believed was immutable, built on love and trust, a foundation so solid I thought nothing could shake it. The quiet rhythm of Brooklyn mornings, the shared jokes over coffee, the scent of freshly brewed espresso, the warmth of Michael's hand in mine, the rare and treasured approval in my father's gaze, these small, familiar moments wove together into a tapestry of comfort and intimacy. They were the intricate, precious threads of a life I cherished, a life that made the eventual unraveling so much more devastating, so much more agonizingly painful in its undoing. The seeds of unease, though, began to subtly sow themselves, not like a sudden explosion, but like a quiet, creeping fog that slowly obscured the familiar landscape of my life. It wasn't a sudden crack in the foundation, but a slow, insidious erosion, almost imperceptible at first. Michael started coming home later, his explanations growing increasingly evasive, tinged with a weariness that felt performative rather than genuine. He'd brush off my questions about his day with a vague, "Just a lot of meetings, Elara. You wouldn't understand," or a quick, dismissive kiss on my forehead that felt more like a duty than an act of affection. I noticed him staring at his phone often, a strange, secret smile playing on his lips, a private world I was excluded from. Sometimes, he'd seem startled when I entered the room, quickly flipping the screen face down with a practiced flick of his wrist. Once, late at night, I overheard him whispering on a call in the hallway, his voice low and urgent, laced with a hushed intimacy that sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't worry. Everything's under control. She suspects nothing." My heart squeezed, a cold, sharp claw tightening around it, leaving me breathless. It felt like a premonition, a discordant note in the otherwise carefully orchestrated symphony of our lives, a wrongness I couldn't articulate but deeply felt. My father, who had once shown a newfound flicker of pride in my professional achievements, now frequently used our weekly Sunday dinners as a platform for veiled criticisms. He'd constantly compare me to my younger sister, Emily, who had recently married and chosen a more traditional family life, focusing on setting up a home and planning for children. "You should learn from Emily," he'd say, his voice deceptively mild, his gaze lingering on me, heavy with unspoken judgment. "She understands what truly matters. A married woman should focus on her home, on her family, Elara, not just chasing ambition and neglecting what truly defines a woman." Those words were like tiny, repeated knives, each one a small, precise cut, slowly carving away at my self-confidence, making me question if my success was truly a source of pride or merely a cause for their silent disapproval, a sign of my fundamental failure as a woman in their eyes. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking, that I was too sensitive, that their concerns were born of love, a clumsy attempt to guide me. But the uneasy feeling persisted, a dull ache beneath the surface. Then, there were the little things, the inconsistencies that pricked at my subconscious like thorns. A new, unfamiliar cologne clinging to Michael's shirts, a scent neither of us wore, subtly floral yet musky, an uncharacteristic defensiveness in his tone whenever I asked about his late nights, a sudden aversion to my touch when we were alone, a subtle pulling away that spoke volumes. And then, the receipts. Tucked deep in the pocket of his favorite navy blazer, folded carefully, were expensive dinner receipts from upscale restaurants we'd never visited together, places known for their intimate, candlelit ambience, not for business meetings. The dates on them coincided precisely with evenings Michael had claimed to be working late at the office, locked away on urgent projects. Each discovery, each quiet whisper of deceit, added another layer to the growing dissonance that grew louder and louder in the silent hours of the night, echoing in my empty apartment when he wasn't there. The dread settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy stone, telling me that the calm, perfect picture of my life, the life I had so diligently built, was an illusion, a carefully constructed facade, and the storm was not just brewing, but gathering tremendous, destructive force. That night, everything shattered. It was the culmination of years of relentless effort, the launch party for the biggest project of my career, the shimmering new high-rise that now pierced the Manhattan skyline, a beacon of modern design, a project I had poured my heart, my soul, my very essence into for 2 grueling years, sacrificing countless nights and weekends. The grand ballroom hummed with congratulations, the air thick with the scent of lilies and success. Champagne flutes clinked, a symphony of triumph, and the myriad lights reflecting off the crystal chandeliers seemed to dance with my personal victory. Yet, amidst the effervescent celebration, I felt a growing, icy chill, a premonition that something was terribly wrong. My father, instead of being front and center, basking in my reflected glory, sat tucked away in a dimly lit corner, far from the central buzz, his face illuminated by the cold glow of his phone screen, a mask of indifference. He was completely disengaged from the culmination of my life's work, from the biggest moment of my professional journey. He didn't even meet my gaze when I passed by, a stark contrast as earlier, rare displays of hesitant pride. It was as if I and my achievements were utterly irrelevant to him. And Michael, who should have been by my side, his hand on my back, sharing in our success, was across the room, his head thrown back in laughter, a deep, resonant sound that once charmed me but now grated on my nerves. His hand rested casually, intimately, on the lower back of Serena. Serena, a young, ambitious colleague who had just joined the firm a few months prior, with eyes that always seemed to follow Michael a little too closely, a little too possessively. It was a gesture all too familiar, a silent claim of ownership, a public display of intimacy that felt like a slap across my face. I watched them, a strange, detached stillness settling over me. They were deep in conversation, their heads close, her hand occasionally brushing his arm, a soft, deliberate touch. My breath hitched in my throat, a physical constriction, but no sound escaped my lips. Then I saw it, a shared glance, a fleeting but unmistakable spark of complicity, a knowing smile that passed between them. And then, as if on cue, they turned, weaving subtly through the crowd, heading purposefully towards the emergency stairwell, a secluded exit from the main hall, designed for quick, unnoticed departures. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even move a muscle. I just stood there, immobile, feeling as if all the oxygen had been sucked from my lungs, leaving me hollow, breathless, and utterly alone in a crowded room. The vibrant music, the effervescent chatter of the crowd, the congratulatory murmurs that had moments ago been directed at me, they all suddenly seemed distant, muffled, as if I were underwater, trapped in a silent, suffocating bubble. My eyes, unblinking, fixed on the shimmering banner above the stage, emblazoned with "Congratulations, Elara, Architect of the Year." The words, meant to be a testament to my ultimate achievement, now mocked me, felt like a cruel, twisted joke played at my expense. And then, in that moment, the entire world tilted on its axis. I crumpled. Not a physical collapse, no dramatic fall to the floor, but an internal implosion, so profound it left me feeling utterly gutted. It wasn't the collapse of a mere professional dream, not truly, but the catastrophic collapse of a belief, of the very foundation of the world I had painstakingly built, brick by brick, on trust and presumed love. The pain was so immense, so sharp, so searing, that it transcended tears, transcended screams, transcended any outward expression of agony. All I could do was remain silent, suspended in the unbearable, suffocating realization that everything I thought was real, everything I believed in, everything I had built my life upon, was nothing but a carefully constructed, elaborate lie. The silence in my own mind was deafening, the echo of a universe shattering around me, leaving only a vast, cold emptiness in its wake. In the suffocating darkness of that night, a darkness far deeper than the absence of light, as everyone else continued to celebrate my success, utterly oblivious to my internal annihilation, I vanished. I didn't go home. There was no home to return to, not anymore. The apartment, once a haven, was now just a collection of memories tainted by deceit. I wandered the deserted, cold streets of Manhattan, the biting wind whipping around me, mirroring the raw emptiness in my gut. There were no tears, no raw, guttural cries of anguish. My tear ducts felt as dry as the desert. Only a terrifying stillness, a chilling clarity settled over me, replacing the chaos of betrayal. My mind, usually a whirl of creative ideas, architectural designs, and future plans, was now a cold, calculating machine, detached and ruthlessly efficient. I started picking up the pieces, not of my broken heart, that would come later, but of the scattered, undeniable evidence. My first stop, before the sun even thought of painting the sky with dawn, was a quiet, dimly lit 24-hour coffee shop, its warmth a stark contrast to the ice in my veins. The aroma of stale coffee and sugar provided a strange comfort. I used their patchy Wi-Fi, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a frantic, focused energy, accessing every digital crumb Michael might have left behind. I went through his phone records, the The call logs, the text messages, hidden applications he thought were secret, encrypted conversations I painstakingly decrypted, secret calls to numbers I didn't recognize. I found a text from Serena, sent late that very night, hours after they had slipped away. "I miss you. See you at our spot tomorrow," followed by an emoji of a playful winking face that made my stomach churn, but no emotion registered on my face. It was just information. I meticulously documented everything, taking screenshots, cross-referencing dates, times, and locations, building a meticulous case. Every lie, every indiscretion, every hidden rendezvous became a data point in my grim analysis. Then, with a chilling resolve, I turned my attention to my father. The betrayal from Michael felt like a sudden, brutal blow, a sharp, clean cut. But my father's betrayal was a slow, seeping poison, a constant drip that had eroded my confidence, chipped away at my worth, making me question my very existence as a modern woman striving for independence. I revisited old conversations, old emails, old family group chats, replaying moments I had dismissed as merely paternal clumsiness. The veiled remarks, the seemingly innocuous comments, the unfair, stinging comparisons to Emily. "You know, Emily always puts family first, Elara. That's what a good woman does." Or, "It's a shame you're so focused on work. You'll miss out on a real life, a family." I remembered the sharp sting of each word, dismissed then as mere parental concern, now seen through the cold, clear lens of calculated condescension, a consistent undermining of my choices and my identity. I gathered screenshots of emails, transcribed old journal entries where I had poured out my confusion and hurt, anything that evidenced his consistent belittling, his deep-seated desire for me to be a different version of myself, a more traditional, subservient woman who would fit neatly into his archaic worldview. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, unburdened by emotion. The betrayal wasn't just from my husband, a man who swore to love me. It was from my father, too, the one who always wanted me to be a different version of myself, a mold he had cast for me, into which I simply refused to fit. This wasn't about revenge in the fiery, dramatic sense, not about retribution or public humiliation. It was about liberation. A quiet, surgical extraction. I began to form a plan. Not to loudly retaliate, not to create a public spectacle or a vengeful scene, but to quietly, meticulously liberate myself from the chains they had unwittingly forged around me, to sever the ties that bound me to their narratives. I needed proof, not just to confront them, not just for them to acknowledge their wrongdoing, but to prove to myself, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I wasn't insane, that my gut feelings, those subtle whispers of doubt, were not figments of an overactive imagination. This was the seed of transformation, watered by silent resolve, nurtured by the cold, clear light of dawn, growing stronger with every piece of evidence I uncovered. The next morning, with a deceptive calm that belied the storm raging within me, I returned home. The apartment, once a sanctuary filled with shared laughter and whispered dreams, now felt like a sterile stage set for a final, quiet act of revelation. Michael was surprised to find me already there, perched calmly on the sofa, laptop open on the coffee table. His face was still a little rumpled from sleep, a faint, unfamiliar scent, Serena's perfume, perhaps, clinging to him. He tried to spin a story about the previous night, his voice a little too eager, a little too smooth, a practiced ease that now felt utterly repellent. He claimed he'd had too much to drink at the party, felt unwell, and had simply slept at the office, not wanting to disturb me. He even managed a practiced, apologetic smile, a familiar charm I now saw through, reaching for my hand, attempting to re-establish a connection that had already been severed. I didn't let him touch me. I just stayed silent, my gaze unwavering, locking directly into his eyes, piercing through the veil of his lies. There was no flicker of emotion in my own eyes, no tremor in my hand as I subtly pulled it away. My voice, when I finally spoke, was an icy whisper, cutting through the flimsy fabric of his deceit. "Where were you and Serena last night, Michael?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. The practiced smile vanished. His face contorted, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He faltered, his eyes darting away, unable to meet my gaze, his breath catching in his throat. He began to stutter, a desperate scramble for words, for another plausible excuse, his usual smooth composure utterly shattered. I didn't let him finish. I walked past him, a quiet, deliberate movement that carried the weight of my newfound resolve, to my laptop, which I had already set up on the kitchen counter. With a click, I projected onto the large screen a video I had retrieved from the building's security camera, clear, undeniable footage of Michael and Serena leaving the main hall, their bodies too close, his hand still intimately resting on her lower back, then disappearing into the stairwell. The timestamp was clear. As the grainy footage played silently, a silent accusation, I opened another file, displaying the intimate messages I had recovered from his phone, scrolling through the explicit confessions of affection, the longing for their spot, the blatant disregard for our life together, for my feelings. Michael's face paled, the color draining from it until he looked like a ghost, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. His gaze darted frantically from the screen to me, then back again, as if searching for an escape, a way to rewind time. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, trembling with a raw fear I had never heard before from this man who had always seemed so confident, so unshakable. "I'm taking back what's mine," I replied, my voice still quiet, but imbued with a steel that resonated through the silent apartment, filling it with my resolves. I picked up the pre-prepared divorce papers, neatly stacked and signed by my lawyer, the ink crisp and final, and handed them to him. They felt impossibly heavy in my hand. Along with them, I included a separate, sealed letter addressed to my father. This letter contained the meticulously gathered evidence of his long-standing favoritism, the countless hurtful remarks he'd made to me over the years, the insidious way he had chipped away at my self-worth, systematically undermining my confidence and my choices. It was all there, laid bare, undeniable. Michael stumbled backward, clutching the papers as if they were burning him, the sheer weight of their reality crushing him. His mouth opened, but no words came out, only a choked gasp. It wasn't a loud revenge, no furious accusations or vengeful shouts. It was a solemn, agonizing transfer of power, a quiet, dignified reclamation of my dignity, a cold, calculated declaration that the game was over and I was no longer a pawn in theirs, but the player who had called checkmate. Michael tried desperately to justify himself, his voice a torrent of desperate pleas, a rapid-fire cascade of excuses, apologies, and promises that rang utterly hollow in the silent apartment. He tried to explain it away, to minimize his actions, to somehow twist the narrative back to a version where he was the unwitting victim, or at least merely misunderstood, caught in an unfortunate circumstance. He pleaded with me to change my mind, to reconsider, to give him another chance, to remember what we had, as if the shared history could somehow erase the present betrayal. But I no longer saw him, not truly. The man standing before me, frantic and pleading, was a stranger, stripped bare of the illusions I had once projected onto him. He had lost the control he thought he held, not just over me, but over his own carefully constructed facade, which had now crumbled irrevocably. His words were just noise, a pathetic, distant echo in a void where my love and trust used to reside. Not long after, news of our divorce, swift and undeniable, spread like wildfire through our interconnected professional and social circles. It was inevitable, the kind of scandal that whispers its way through boardrooms and cocktail parties. And with it, Michael's once unshakable career suffered a significant, undeniable blow. Projects he was slated to lead mysteriously shifted to other architects. Lucrative deals he had been close to finalizing seemed to slip inexplicably through his fingers. The whispers followed him, the subtle shifts in demeanor from colleagues, the polite but distant smiles, the hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when he approached. Serena, too, found herself in an unenviable position. Within weeks, she lost her job at the firm, the why left unspoken, but understood by all who knew the story. My father, upon receiving the meticulously documented letter and seeing the clear, undeniable evidence of how he had systematically undermined me, how his words had festered and wounded my spirit for years, remained utterly silent. A long, agonizing silence. He didn't call, didn't try to explain, didn't apologize. And in that profound silence, I felt no glee, no triumph, no desire for further retribution. Only an immense, profound sense of relief. A crushing weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally, completely lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in years. I began to heal, not in a dramatic burst of newfound joy, but with the quiet, deliberate pace of a garden slowly, steadily blooming after a long, harsh winter. Each day was a gentle unfolding. I rented a small, sun-drenched apartment on the outskirts of the city, near the ocean, where the rhythmic crash of the waves provided a natural, calming lullaby, slowly soothing the ragged, torn edges of my soul. The scent of salt and sea air became my new perfume. I devoted time to old hobbies I had neglected for far too long, interests that had been pushed aside in my relentless pursuit of professional success and what I thought was personal happiness. I signed up for a painting class, feeling the satisfying drag of the brush on canvas, the vibrant colors bleeding into each other, a stark contrast to the monochrome emotional landscape of my recent past. I started running again along the beachfront, feeling the exhilarating burn in my lungs, the renewed strength returning to my limbs, a tangible reminder of my own innate resilience. I reconnected with true friends, those who had always seen and valued me for who I was, not for who I was with, or what I had achieved. We shared quiet meals, punctuated by easy laughter and sometimes comfortable, understanding silence. We spoke of dreams, of futures, of shared histories. The process was slow, sometimes painfully so, punctuated by moments of doubt, flashes of residual hurt, and the occasional lingering phantom ache of what was lost. But piece by precious piece, day by day, breath by breath, I meticulously reclaimed my life. Each decision, no matter how small, choosing a new coffee mug, arranging furniture in my own space, deciding what to eat for dinner, felt like a deliberate act of self-possession, a quiet reaffirmation of my own worth, an assertion of my autonomy. The ocean breeze on my face, the scent of fresh paint, the warmth of genuine camaraderie, the quiet hum of my own peaceful solitude, these were the new, vibrant threads I wove into the tapestry of my existence, creating a life that was truly, finally, uniquely mine. Finally, I was free. Not because I had forgotten the searing pain of betrayal, for some scars, however faded, remain etched in the soul, indelible reminders of where we've been, but because I had transcended it. The heavy cloak of bitterness, the consuming drama of resentment, the relentless, gnawing presence of anger, they had all fallen away, shedding themselves like dead skin, leaving behind a core of quiet, unyielding strength. There was no longer a need to punish, no desire for public spectacle, just a profound sense of inner peace. I looked back at the arduous, often brutal path I had walked, from a woman dismissed, betrayed, and utterly broken, to a confident, independent woman who stood firm on her own 2 feet, unafraid of the vast, open future stretching before her. The architects of my pain had been exposed, their own foundations shaken, but my own had been rebuilt, stronger, more resilient, and more beautiful than ever before. Life still held challenges, I knew that. There would be new storms, new doubts, new uncertainties, for that is the nature of existence. But I also knew, with a calm certainty that settled deep in my bones, a quiet wisdom gained through fire, that I would overcome them. The betrayal had not destroyed me. It had refined me, forged me in its agonizing fire into something resilient and true, something unbreakable. The finality of it all was not a sigh of relief, but a quiet, powerful exhale, a breath of pure, untainted freedom. There was no longer a question of if I would survive, but how I would thrive. Have you found your way back after betrayal?